What is up everyone, Jeremy here, and in this video we are talking all about saturation and harmonics. We're going to talk about the three types of saturation most commonly used in mixing, how you can identify which of your analog simulation plugins are producing harmonics and visualize them. Then we'll finish things up with some real world examples of applying saturation in a mix. All right, so before we get ahead of ourselves and start talking about saturation and harmonics and all of that, let's just briefly go over what saturation is. In a nutshell, saturation is essentially the soft clipping that occurs when an audio signal crosses the 0 dB gain threshold in analog hardware. These days, however, we have analog simulation plugins that mimic this clipping behavior of analog gear and are what we will be focusing on in this video. Now, a very important part of saturation and what makes it so useful is that it creates harmonics that help make an audio signal sound bigger, fatter, and thicker.
Nice.
We'll be going into more on harmonics later in the video, so stay tuned for that. Lastly, saturation can apply a form of compression to the audio signal as well, which makes it a handy tool for not only beefing up an audio signal, but also taming rogue transients, among other useful applications. All right, so now that we understand what saturation is, let's talk about the three most commonly used types of saturation and how to use them in your mixes. The first type of saturation we're going to talk about is tape saturation, and more specifically, tape saturation simulation plugins. These plugins simulate an audio signal passing through an analog tape machine. Tape machines are known for adding odd order harmonics, a boost in low end frequencies, smoothing of top end frequencies, and applying some subtle compression which helps to tame transient peaks. All of these are traits you will find in tape simulation plugins. Some common ways to apply tape saturation would be on your drum bus or a full mix. Maybe your drums are a bit harsh in the top end, or you're looking to control some transient peaks. Tape saturation would be a great way to achieve both of these things, and the same is true on a full mix, which is how I tend to use it myself. Next up, we have tube saturation. Tube saturation simulation plugins do exactly what it sounds like. They simulate the characteristics of analog tubes. Tube saturation creates even order harmonics and applies subtle compression similar to tape saturation. However, when pushed hard, tube saturation gets pretty aggressive and can sound very distorted. Where tube saturation really shines though is how the even order harmonics can actually increase an audio signal's perceived loudness and dimension. Because of this, it's a very handy tool to use on individual tracks that need help cutting through a dense mix or on an entire mix to help add depth and perceived loudness. The third and final type of saturation we're going to talk about is transistor saturation. Transistor saturation simulation plugins simulate the characteristics of, surprise, surprise, analog transistors. One of the most common types of plugins that utilizes this form of saturation are preamp plugins. A lot of analog preamps utilize transistor-based circuits, so it only makes sense that if you're using a transistor-based preamp plugin, it's going to apply transistor saturation. Transistor saturation introduces odd order harmonics and a form of hard clipping compression. Because of this, if pushed too hard, it can result in a less punchy sound, whereas applying more subtle amounts can have a sort of smoothing effect. Now that we've gone over the three most common types of saturation and have discussed how they add different types of harmonics, I'd like to show you how you can visualize these harmonics and see exactly what's going on within different types of analog simulation plugins. All right, so in order to visualize the harmonics in these plugins, what I'm doing is, first of all, I'm in Logic and I'm utilizing the test oscillator plugin and I have it set to 1000 Hertz. So this just is a sine wave, so it's a continuous sound sine wave being played at 1000 Hertz. What we're going to do is we're now going to just run through a bunch of different analog emulation plugins or saturation plugins and just kind of see what sort of harmonics we get. Now remember, there are odd order harmonics and even order harmonics. Odd order harmonics are when you basically can multiply, so we're at 1000 Hertz, you multiply that by 3, by 5, by 7, and we'll see those those kind of bars showing up here at 3, 5, and 7. And then the same thing for even order, it's 2, 4, 6, etc. So an even order harmonic being applied to this 1000 hertz sine wave, we would see 2000 hertz, 4000 hertz, 6000 hertz, like etc. An odd order would be 3000 hertz, 5007, etc. All right, so the first plugin we're going to look at here is Exciter from Audio Assault, and this is a saturation plugin. So it doesn't necessarily emulate one specific thing, it can emulate multiple different types of saturation. And we're going to look at two out of all the ones they have in here. That's tube and transistor. So we'll start with tube, and I'm going to engage the plugin, and we should see some harmonics show up here up in FabFilter. And there they are. So you can see we've got some even order harmonics at 2, 4, and then one down here at 6, and then it kind of tapers off from there. We also have some odd order harmonics, so we're getting 3, 5, 7, and so on. So that's the tube saturation. So let's go to transistor now and see what we've got here. And so this is, we're getting different amounts of harmonics, but it looks to also be 2, 3, 4, 5. So it looks to be both even and odd order harmonics. So that is Exciter from Audio Assault. All right, the next plugin we're going to look at is FabFilter Saturn, which is very similar to Exciter that we just looked at from Audio Assault. This is a multi-band saturation plugin that can emulate multiple types of saturation. Again, we're not going to look at all of them, but we'll look at two. We're going to look at the warm tape and the warm tube. And so I will engage this, and we'll see what kind of harmonics we get with the warm tape. So this looks to be only odd order harmonics. So you can see 3 and 5 right there. And if I increase the drive, we'll see more of them showing up, as you can see there. So we got 3, 5, 7, and so on. So that is the warm tape. Let's see what did we get with warm tube. So this looks to be kind of, again, a combination of even and odd order harmonics, where we have 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. So that is FabFilter Saturn. Let's take a look at another one. All right, next up is the Black Box Analog Design HG-2MS from Plugin Alliance. This is one of my favorite saturation plugins. This is clearly a tube saturation plugin. As you can see, the tubes right in the graphic in the middle. So let's go ahead and engage this and just see what harmonics we get by default with all the default settings without changing anything else. So right there, we're getting a bit of even and odd order harmonics at 2 and 3, and then you can see the peak of 4 right there. So let's go ahead and just kind of turn up the saturation and the density, which really should bring up our harmonic levels here, and we'll see what we get. So I'm just gonna boost some things up. Ooh, there we go. Now we're getting quite a bit more. And then let's see what happens with the density. That should bring them down and then really boost them up there. Geez, that you can see there's a ton of harmonics happening here. So that is really, I mean, at this point, as I mentioned earlier, this is kind of where you can really kind of push tube saturation too far. I would say if you're pushing it like this, it's just gonna sound crazy distorted. Yeah, I mean, you can see if that was an actual audio signal, like a drum, putting it on the drum bus, or like a synth or something, it would just be super, super distorted. So that was, that obviously that can be used for useful effects here and there, but you probably don't want to push it that far very often. All right, so the next plugin we're going to look at here quickly is the SSL Bus Compressor from SSL. This is part of their SSL Native plugin suite that they've got online now. And let's just go ahead and engage this and see what harmonics we get. So right there, we're getting a couple peaks at 3 and 5,000 hertz. So these are odd order harmonics. And so let's just go ahead and play with some of these settings and see what we get. Yeah, so we're already getting what, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th order harmonics here. I mean, there's quite a few. Changing the attack just really boosted the harmonics. Yeah, I mean, you can see this is clearly adding a ton of harmonics here, especially when you crush the signal really heavily like this. We're getting a ton of harmonics. So yes, these bus compressors based on analog hardware will provide you with some form of harmonic saturation. So those can actually help just running through them without even applying anything. We were getting harmonics, as you can see right there. So even just running through them, it's going to add some form of analog flavor and saturation to your audio signal. All right, and so the next plugin we're gonna look at is the Lindell 50 channel strip from Plugin Alliance. Let's just go ahead and engage it and see what we get. So right there, we're getting some even and odd order harmonics. We've got at 2000 Hertz, 3, 4. And so just again, running your audio signal through this analog emulation plugin, you're going to get some harmonic content in there. So it's going to help kind of beef up your audio signal a bit. So let's just kind of see what we get by playing with this EQ. Just gonna turn everything up. Boosted them a little bit. See, yeah, the compressor is certainly boosting the harmonic content. So yeah, I mean, there you can see quite a bit of harmonic content coming from this channel strip. All right, next up is FreakQ from Audio Assault. So this is described as a saturator EQ. So let's just engage it and see what we get. I don't see any harmonics just by engaging it. So let's just go ahead and start turning up some of these dials and see what we get. Oh, wow. Immediately start getting some harmonic content here. So this is just at 500 Hertz and I've only turned it up not even 3 dB, and we're already getting some odd order harmonics here, and they're coming up pretty quickly. And this, I should note, this is in console mode, so if we change to classic mode, you can see that drops the harmonic content quite a bit, and then digital should just be completely clean. It's not based on any analog hardware, so it's not giving us that kind of clipping that you would happen in analog emulation or in analog hardware. So it should be completely clean without any harmonics, as you would expect, and as you can see. So console is giving us the most harmonic content here. And so if I just keep turning these up, there's just a ton of harmonic content coming from this plugin as well. So this is not only going to apply a form of EQ, but it's also saturation as well. So it's really gonna kind of beef up those signals that you're EQing. All right, and sticking with EQ plugins here, this is the AMEK EQ200 from Plugin Alliance. So let's just engage this and see if we get any harmonic content. So nothing right off the bat, similar to FreakQ from Audio Assault that we just saw. So let's just start turning up some of these dials and see what we get. So we can see an odd order harmonic start to show up here. I'm just turning up the level on all these EQs, and so far we only have a second order harmonic, which is an odd harmonic here at 3000 Hertz. And okay, so the THD really boosts it. And I think that is their form of saturation. So in fact, if I turn it off, yeah. So I'm pretty sure the THD, I'd have to pull up the manual to know for sure, but maybe somebody can drop in the comments and correct me if I'm wrong here, but I'm pretty sure the THD is their form of kind of analog emulation. So this is gonna add the harmonic content. So as you can see, turning it on and boosting it gives us more harmonic content, turning it off, and there is none. So that is the AMEK EQ200. All right, and getting to a tape emulation plugin here. This is the virtual tape machine from Slate Digital. Let's just engage this and see what harmonic content we get. There you go. So we're getting some even order and odd order harmonics. We've got a second, third, fourth, and fifth order harmonic. And let's just kind of turn up the inputs and just really push this thing and see what we get. Wow. So yeah, you can definitely push this thing too far, but you can see all the harmonic content that we're getting from this. That is incredible. Turning it down obviously is going to drop it to really low. There's also some like gain or like something's happening here on the top end. When I turn this down, we're getting some fizzy up there and there. I'm not sure what that's from. But yeah, this generates a ton of harmonic content. But just even at the default settings like this, you can see we've got some like fourth order harmonics showing up here. So yeah, this is definitely gonna do a great job of doing what a tape machine is gonna do and beef up that signal. Do note it does add quite a bit of low end. So there's even this setting in here where you can actually pull back some of the bass, which is something I often do. It's gonna round off some of those transients and then smooth out your top end as well. So I really like these tape emulation plugins. All right, and sticking with Slate Digital here, this is the virtual mix rack. And we're gonna take a look at 4 different plugins here, and I'm just gonna kind of quickly flip through them. So I'm gonna engage this and then turn on the first one here, which is the New York preamp. And I believe, somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, I believe this is based on an API preamp. But you can see we're already getting a ton of even order harmonics. We've got, I'm not even gonna count them. There's a bunch of harmonics here. And I haven't even done anything. I just turned on this preamp and we're getting a bunch of harmonics. So you can see that. And then if I turn up the saturation, it's just gonna get, I mean, that just completely got out of hand right there. That's just ridiculous. But you can see this adds a ton of harmonic content. So let's move to the Neve 1073 style preamp here. Turning it on, we get one little tiny touch right there. It looks like an odd order harmonic at 3000 Hertz. Let's turn up the virtual drive. Nothing really happening yet. And there we go. Now we're getting some harmonic content. It's strange though. Somebody tell me if this is the way. I've never used an actual Neve 1073 preamp, so I don't know if this is right or not, but it's very strange to me that basically from 20 all the way through 60, it does basically nothing. And when I get to about like 62 or so, it just jumps like crazy. So, but you can see it adds a ton of harmonic content there. Now let's go to the virtual channel. Bunch of harmonic content showing up. And this, you can actually change through multiple different styles of channel strips. So you've got the Brit 4KE, SSL E style channel strip, SSL G style channel strip, USA, I'm guessing that's API, Brit N, so there's your Neve, and then there's some other ones here as well. Wow, there's a ton of harmonic content there. So then we'll do the virtual bus. So wow, tons of harmonic content on the SSL E, the SSL G, a good amount of harmonic content there. A little bit less on the API, a little bit less on the Neve as well. You can see those different harmonic contents there. All right, and the last of the Slate digital plugins we're gonna look at is the virtual bus compressors. So this has what's, I believe is like an SSL style bus compressor, the Focusrite Red, and I'm not sure what the bottom one is, but let's just turn this on. All three of these are engaged right now. Let's turn it on and see what we get. So there we go, we've got some even order harmonics showing up. If we turn them all off, we should have nothing. Then we'll turn them all on one at a time. So the bottom one, you can see we're getting some even order harmonics there. The middle one, the same thing, just less. And the SSL style, I believe up here on the top, is giving us the most. So there you go, just literally running through these compressors without doing any actual compression, you can see you're getting some harmonic content, which is gonna help beef up your source. And in fact, running through this one here on the bottom was something that is kind of a trick for certain things like synths and guitars and stuff like that. It actually adds this really great sounding mid-range. So if you have this and you want to try it, just send an audio signal through it and you will hear what I'm talking about. All right, the second to last plugin we're going to look at here is the Shadow Hills Class A Mastering Compressor from Plugin Alliance. I'm just going to turn it on and see what we get. So you can see we've got some second and third order harmonics showing up here. Looks like even order harmonics. And so if I just start turning up some of these thresholds and output gains, you can see we're getting some additional harmonic content here. Oh yeah, changing the attack is certainly adding more. So yeah, you can see we're definitely getting a good amount of harmonic content here. It's not as like loud in the signal as others that I've seen, but there are certainly a bunch of harmonics happening here. All right, and the last plugin we're gonna look at is the BX Limiter True Peak from Plugin Alliance. So let's just turn it on and see if we get anything. And I am not seeing anything. It's perfectly clean at this point. So let's just kind of increase the gain. I saw some harmonics just show up there. I'm not sure what that was about. Oh, they're showing up and then disappearing. So there's some in there somewhere. So the XL, I do know, is supposed to be a form of saturation. So I'm assuming I turn this up and we're gonna get exactly that, some harmonic content here from the saturation being applied. But overall, this looks like a pretty clean plugin. Let's try Classic. Nothing really showing up here, which is kind of what I would expect from a limiter like this. It's not necessarily based on any like real analog hardware. And if I don't want to add the saturation in my limiting, right, because this is kind of meant to be like your two bus, like your main master limiter. If I don't want to add, say, the XL, I don't want the harmonic content. So that's kind of what I would expect. So that is the BX Limiter True Peak. So there you go. There's a handy trick to visualize the harmonics created by your plugins. All right, so as promised, I want to wrap things up by showing you some real-world examples of how I use saturation in my mixes. And to do this, I've got a recent session up here that is applying different forms of saturation, and we're going to run through a few of them. And the very first thing I'll mention is in my main bus here, which is where everything in the entire mix eventually routes through the main. The very first thing that we have here is the Slate digital tape machine. So this is the tape emulation, the tape saturation. And you can see I've got mostly the default settings here. I think the only thing I changed was the tape type, and in the settings I did pull back the bass alignment almost 2 dB because, as I mentioned before in the video, tape saturation adds a boost to your low end frequency. So I wanted to pull that back a bit because it was a little too much. So that is one of the ways that I'm applying tape saturation in my mixes, and I'll give you a quick A and B before and after. So I'll play this back, and I'm just going to loop a little section here, and we'll play this back, and about halfway through or so I'll engage it and just kind of really listen to the bottom end, the smoothing of the top end, and this also does kind of round some of the transient peaks, but I've got a lot of that already controlled with limiters and stuff throughout the mix, so you may not hear any real rounding of transient peaks, but really listen to the bottom end and the top end and just the overall fatness of and thickness of the mix. So here we go. All right, next up is the Black Box HG-2MS from Plugin Alliance. This is as I mentioned before, a tube saturation plugin. And I have this applied on my pre-main bus. And so this routes into main, but the only things I send into pre-main are my drums and the bass and the synths. If there were vocals in this, which there's not, they would not go through this pre-main. I process those separately, and my guitars do not go through this either. So it's the drums, the bass, and the synths. So let's go ahead and I will bypass this and play it back and let it go for a couple bars and engage it and really listen to how, because I've got this in mid-side mode, how the saturation up the middle is going to really fatten up that kick drum and the snare and anything up the middle like the bass, and then how on the sides, like my cymbals and the synths and anything that has a wide stereo sound is going to really kind of expand out because of the saturation on the sides. So just kind of listen for those things, and here we go. And one other thing I should have pointed out is the air band that exists in this plugin allows you to add saturation to your top end, which adds air and clarity and a crispiness to the top end. And so you can see I'm applying a bit of it to my mids and quite a bit to the sides. So when I engage this, it also you got that top end air that came through and really kind of cleared things up in the mix as well. All right, and so the last example we're going to look at here is Exciter from Audio Assault. And the way that I'm using this is, as you can see, I've got it on tube here, and the only frequencies that I'm really using this on are between 735 hertz up to 4.46 kilohertz. So this is a multi-band saturation plugin, and I'm only applying it to those frequencies because this is being applied to my synths. And what I found was by boosting up utilizing some tube saturation and blending that in on my synths, it really helped them cut through this dense mix, especially when we got those heavy guitars and those cymbals and all of that. In this upper end, the synths were just kind of getting totally drowned out. So I'm gonna bypass this and we'll play it back, the same little loop you've just heard a couple times. I'll let it go a couple bars and really listen to how much this helps the synths cut through this mix. So there you go, everyone. This was a super long video. There's a ton of content in here, but I hope you found this helpful and interesting, and maybe you learned something along the way. If you did, do me a favor and hit that like and subscribe button down below. Hit the comments with any questions or thoughts you have on this content. And as always, I want to thank you for watching this video and thank you for your support.